You know, in every organization, there's the org chart everyone sees. And then there's the real one. It's the one that never makes it into a PowerPoint, but it's the one that actually decides who wins, who loses, and why. This is the unseen architecture of power. It isn't drawn with solid lines of authority, but with these invisible currents of influence. And today, we're pulling back that curtain. We're going to map that architecture.
All right, let's really get into this. We're all taught to look for power at the top, right? To focus on the person with the big title. But the real influence, the kind that shapes a decision long before it's ever officially made, well, that often belongs to the person who controls the flow of information to that leader. They control the context, they write the summary, they literally build the reality that choices are based on. And that's the paradox we're digging into, the huge difference between formal authority and actual power.
So who is this person? We call them the shadow leader, and they exist because of a simple biological fact of leadership: decision fatigue. A senior leader is making hundreds of choices a day, and their brain power is a finite resource. The shadow leader's job is to step right into that gap. They become the manager of the leader's reality, simplifying this incredibly complex world for them in a way that, well, just so happens to serve their own agenda. And let's be real, we've all been there. You've seen it happen. A brilliant project backed by solid data and a passionate team just withers and dies for no apparent reason. Or you see a super talented colleague get passed over for a promotion, and it makes zero sense. It feels random, illogical, and honestly, it's infuriating. But what you're seeing isn't chaos. It's the output of a system. It's a calculated move that was decided long before you ever saw it play out. That feeling, that frustration when your best work just seems to vanish into a void, it actually has a name. It's the black box problem of management. It's that mysterious place where good ideas, solid facts, and even promising careers go in and just never come out. You did everything right. You followed the process, but the outcome was still completely wrong. To figure out how to get around this, we first need to understand what's really going on under the hood. So the first symptom is something called strategic blindness. You think your audience is the leader, the person with their name on the door. So you build your whole presentation, your whole argument for them. But here's the problem. They might never actually see your undiluted work. It's being filtered, summarized, and judged by a gatekeeper first, the shadow leader. They've become your real judge and jury, and you didn't even know it. You're basically playing to the wrong audience. And the outcome of this is just crushing. It's a psychological state called learned helplessness. After you run into that invisible wall enough times, you start to believe that how hard you work just doesn't matter. Why bother innovating? Why put in the extra hours? Your best stuff is just going to get watered down or twisted before it even gets to the person who makes the call. This is how really smart organizations lose their best people. Not because they aren't talented, but because the system makes them feel completely powerless. Okay, so this whole game is played inside what we call the information asymmetry gap. This is the space between what's really happening on the ground, the actual data, what the team really thinks, and the simplified, curated story that gets presented to the leader. The shadow leader's power comes from controlling and widening this gap. They don't just report on reality, they become the author of it. So how do they create this gap and then defend it so fiercely? It's not magic. It's a mechanism, a repeatable process we call the access filter loop. The best way to think about it is like a cognitive firewall that the advisor slowly builds around the leader. This firewall makes them the essential bridge that all information has to cross. It's a hidden engine that quietly moves power from the person in charge to the person whispering in their ear. Let's break down how this engine works. It's basically a 4-act play. First up is the ingratiation phase. The advisor makes themselves totally indispensable by taking care of all the little stressful things. They become a safe harbor, lowering the leader's stress. Then comes the occlusion phase. This is where they start managing the leader's calendar, filtering who gets in, summarizing reports, all in the name of making things more efficient. Now they're the central hub. Next is reality framing. They don't have to lie. They just have to provide the summary, highlighting the data that supports their goal and, leaving out the stuff that doesn't. And finally, you get the payoff. The leader makes a decision feeling totally in control, but it's based entirely on a script the advisor already wrote. And this is the result. To the rest of the world, nothing looks different. The leader is still the one signing off, still making the big announcements. But the real leverage point, the place where the decision was actually made, that's moved. It's not in the corner office anymore. It's at the desk of the person who controls the filter. The formal authority is still there, but the effective power has been completely transferred. Now, you're probably thinking, how on earth does a smart, successful leader fall for this? And the answer has nothing to do with intelligence. It's all about biology.
This entire system works not because leaders are naive, but because it exploits these predictable, hardwired glitches in how the human brain works, especially when it's under stress.
The main vulnerability is how our brains are wired. Think of it like this. You have two operating modes. System 2 is your deep, analytical thinking. It's powerful, but it's slow and burns a ton of energy. System 1 is your fast, gut reaction thinking. It loves shortcuts. A leader who's drowning in decisions is naturally going to default to System 1 to save energy. The shadow leader's whole strategy is to feed that System 1 brain, presenting their preferred option as the easiest, most obvious choice.
And this gets amplified by a really powerful bias called the proximity effect. Our brains are basically hardwired from our caveman days to trust people who are physically close to us all the time. The advisor weaponizes this. Their constant presence creates this unearned halo of expertise. The leader's brain starts to confuse the advisor's access with actual knowledge. They're always there, so they must know what they're talking about, right?
And this is where the trap snaps shut. The leader gets caught by the availability heuristic. Because the advisor is their main, most immediate source of information, that curated information becomes the only information. When it's time to make a big call, the leader isn't choosing from all the possible options. They're choosing from a tiny, pre-selected menu that the advisor has allowed them to see. Their world has been shrunk, and they don't even know it. The final lock-in is what we call status dependency. The advisor builds this reputation with the leader and everyone else that they are the only one who really gets how the leader thinks. They become the official interpreter. This makes them indispensable. And it's a brilliant defense mechanism because if you question the advisor, you're pretty much questioning the leader too.
Okay, so we've looked at the problem, we've taken apart the engine, and we've seen why it works. Now, let's get to the good part, the solution. How do you counter this? How do you protect your work, your career, and frankly, your organization from a manipulative filter? It's all about making a mental shift from being a victim of the system to being a strategic student of.
So let's ask that question directly. Now that you can see the architecture, you have a huge advantage. You can see the code in the matrix. The key isn't to just charge in and fight the system head on. That almost always backfires. The key is to navigate it with intelligence. It's about auditing the filter, not attacking the lead. Here's your playbook. 3 strategic moves. First, label the node. The second you realize all information is flowing through one person, you just mentally name it. Okay, that's an access filter node. Just doing that engages your logical brain and helps you sidestep that feeling of helplessness. Second, build network redundancy. Never ever depend on just one path to the decision maker. Build relationships with other key people. Make sure your good work has multiple ways to get to the center, so no single person can block you. And third, and this is for the leaders out there, use the raw data protocol. Make it a habit to ask for the unfiltered info. Do skip-level meetings. Intentionally break down your own cognitive firewall before it becomes a prison.
And this leads to a really important point. Understanding the system isn't just about defense, it's also about how to play offense ethically. If you're the one with access, you have a choice. You can be a gatekeeper and hoard information for your own power, or you can be a transparent node. You can use your position to bring the leader the entire picture, even the parts that are messy or challenge your own ideas. That's how you build a much more lasting kind of power, real, genuine trust.
Let's just let that one sink in. In our world of information overload, the real power doesn't belong to the person who creates data. It belongs to the person who synthesizes it. The one who tells the story, who provides the summary. That's the person who frames reality for everyone else. This is the absolute core of shadow influence.
Ultimately, the most powerful weapon against this kind of manipulation is just awareness. These systems only work in the dark. They rely on people not knowing the rules of the game. But the moment you can see the access filter loop, the second you can name the cognitive biases at play, its power over you starts to evaporate. You're no longer just a piece on the board. You're a player.
So here it is, the final takeaway, the one thing to remember. When you feel that frustration, when you see a bad decision about to happen, your gut reaction might be to argue with the leader. But the smarter, more strategic move is to look at the information they're getting. Who's providing that summary? What's being left out? Your focus shouldn't be on the person with the title, but on the person who wrote their script. Don't fight the leader, audit the filter.